Speaking about Germany a little bit, so you've done RTL Plus, but we've just, seen the approval from the German authorities and the European authorities on the RTL Sky Germany partnership. And there you have very different technology stack. One is pay TV offering a lot of live, very premium, etc. Does very little advertising, if not none. There's also that question of there's so many different platforms, different brands, etc. on each side of that merger. Are you guys going to be working on that? Is that your next big, chunk to work on? Welcome to Streaming Made Easy Live. Over the next few weeks, I'm having conversation with amazing partners who are going to be on stage with me on September 10th. This is the second edition of SME Live in Amsterdam, the day before IBC. And so today, I'm bringing you guys the CEO of Bedrock Streaming, Jonas Engel. Hey, Jonas.
Hi, nice to be here. Nice to see you, as
Yeah, you're
always.
you're a friend of the podcast. You're a friend of SME. I think we have a lot of in common. I think both of us are really trying to champion European streaming. So I think let's dive, right into it. One thing that I've noticed these last few years, right? I think pre 2020, every month we had a new streaming service launching. We've had some of these, but I will say that what I've noticed is we're more at a point in time where we're seeing platforms being rebuilt, transition, expanded, go hybrid, etc. From where you sit, at Bedrock, you operate across France, the Netherlands, Germany, some of the biggest platforms operated by broadcasters in the region. What have you seen these last 12 months in streaming, particularly in Europe, that struck you as new, a trend?
I have had tunnel vision these last 12 months, very much focused on Germany and other clients, of course. I think if you're talking about general trends, I think that I would talk about the trend is strengthening. I would say everyone is so focused on financials,
Yeah.
getting everything to profitability, making sure that it's financially sound. I think that was already a trend 12 months ago and probably 24 months ago, I think. But I think it's getting more important every day. I think it's the conversation in every boardroom. So I think that's what we're seeing. There's this huge cost pressure, which is good and it makes sense, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that in our case we're lucky, right? There's also expansion and a lot of things happening, but cost is definitely right up there on the agenda.
And why is that? Is that because after the first few years of streaming and going D2C, folks were focused on catching up to Netflix kind of at all cost, or is it because we're also seeing growth slowing, advertising revenues being challenged? Is that also just simple math?
Yeah, I think it is. It's typically what happens, right? There's always a land grab phase, and then everyone realizes that there's the pie is only so big, and then reality sets in, and then you have to adjust, right? I think it's a cycle that is makes sense, and it's a cycle that will repeat itself. Yeah, and I think that if you in the land grab phase were only focusing on cost reduction, you probably would have lost out. So it's a normal phase, and then of course there is a reality happening. I think that I think I know we came to this conclusion a long time ago. It is difficult to compete with players that have global scale, and if you're doing that from one market, it's just difficult, right? It's mathematically very very challenging. So yeah, so then I think people are more and more seeing that conundrum, and then pulling the handbrake, or let's say forcing the teams to think differently is a must.
So one thing that we've seen, so to your point, right, on cutting costs, looking for profitability, and we'll be talking about RTL Plus, a bit later in this episode. But I believe in Q1 this year, that was their first quarter where they were, profitable, and that coincides with the fact that they migrated not to a standalone RTL Plus technology platform, but actually to the group platform, which you operate. Well, about this point on how to compete with the global guys when you're local players. What we're seeing right now is that we're seeing either players trying to consolidate, within their market. So Sky and ITV in the UK, RTL and Sky Germany in Germany. So that's one way, right? Is within your market, you're actually building this one big platform that taps both into pay TV, free TV, AVOD, etc. You name it. There's also the argument of trying to build, all using the same stack. And right now, I'm not seeing that enough. Meaning that I don't think we were able to build the Netflix of Europe, meaning that one platform that can say, Europe's champion, so to say. We have a lot of local champions. Why is that? Why aren't we making, more headway in building this, one tech platform, so to say, that could service multiple players across the region?
So let me try to maybe divide it into two aspects, right? So from an end user perspective, I fully agree with you. I fundamentally believe. I mean, if you look at European players, the one undisputable benefit we have is the local content. That's our USP, right? So I think that it is way better for an end user to find that content in one place per country. I would argue, just because that's just how Europe's DNA, right? We don't necessarily cross country so much as an end user. So I really fundamentally think that would be a better end user prospect to have content in one place. It would help to surface the content. It would be cheaper, more efficient in so many ways. Then, in it's what Bedrock is doing behind the scenes, so to speak, we are building this, and we have built a platform that operates across countries. It looks totally different in every country, and that is how it should be. Why are we not in every country? You ask basically. I think it is. There's a lot of good answers to that question. I think that us Europeans we're pretty slow, honestly, to adapt, if I can say. I think we saw what was happening 5-6 years ago, and we talked about it, and I feel like when we go to these conferences, the topics are very similar, and they don't move that much, right? So I think that's part of the answer. It is very difficult to do these partnerships. It is very difficult to fundamentally change the DNA of how you operate things. So that and it takes time. I don't know. I also think that it's partly human behavior, right? It's tech moves way faster than how people use tech and how people make decisions. That's clear. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think
Yeah,
there's a lot
no,
of.
absolutely. I will chime in and say that, what I've loved these last few years in Europe, and to, a bigger extent than in the US, we're not seeing anything like that. In the US, you really feel like everyone is still, very much, competing with one another. I think there's been a realization in the region that, partnership are the key. So some went the whole way and did M&A. So that's, the Sky and RTL, Sky and ITV of the world. But you look at Netflix and TF1, you look at how all of the broadcasters and streamers in the regions have actually built that collaboration. I think that solves, so to say, in parts that fragmentation. Having said that, it feels like everyone is very hung up on having its own thing at all costs, which from a D2C consumer facing perspective, I completely get. We don't want to have a one size fits all, to your point, right? We want that local flavor. We want those local brands that we trust. But in the background, one might argue that, having again this bedrock, which is what you guys do, in the background operating, it is, the end consumer doesn't see it, but the benefits for you and your business are massive. And I think there's a bit of ego and control in there, right? In that lack of willingness to transition to a third party. So
Yeah, yeah, I
let's
agree.
see what happens. But I think this is where we gain that speed you mentioned. We'll talk a bit more about that, because I think that's part of the USP from you guys is, whatever you do, it doesn't benefit just one of your, partners. It benefits the entire ecosystem of partners.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
Just one comment on what you were saying. I agree with you that partnerships are being struck up. And the question I have is, I generally think partnerships should be done more between local players. I think
Yeah.
that's a better outcome because, again, to the point that we have local content, which is our USP, I think we should be very careful how we operate that USP. I personally think that local partnerships, and then of course you can strike that. When I say partnerships, it's coming together one way or the other. So
Yeah.
M&E mergers is one way to do it. Partnerships is another. To me, just to be clear, I'm not saying, I don't think that it's wrong to kind of do certain
Yeah.
international partnerships, but I don't think it's the solution to the European kind of challenge. I think it's okay to do it opportunistically. I think it's totally fine to, and you should, let's say, put certain content on YouTube and this kind of thing. I think that's completely right. I just don't think that it's the final solution to Europe's streaming challenge. That's my opinion.
No, 100%. I agree with you. I think it's a. I mean, it's the catch 22, right? Because ultimately, local players are looking to grow, their turf, and who has that scale? The big global guys. Hence, why you have that two-way street happening between broadcasters, streamers, YouTube, etc. I agree with you. There's a lot of risks in there. That's the brand attribution. Are you going to be diluted? Are people still going to be coming to your own and operate it if you're pretty much available everywhere? I mean, it is hard to know what's going to come out of the TF1 Netflix deal, France Télé going onto YouTube, France Télé going onto Amazon, etc. I see this as a trial and error. They're going to see what happens. Hopefully, they share that with us, and we can chime in and discuss this. And we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when the renewal comes up.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Now, in terms of collaborating between local players, where I agree is from a technology advertising standpoint, from a content standpoint, I think it's tricky because ultimately, what are you gaining by being on someone else's platform? I'm thinking, what's in it for M6 or TF1 to be on one another? I'm not sure there's so much value in that. And will you gain, that added scale, that new audience that perhaps eludes you? I don't know, but I do think that local players should, I agree, collaborate together much more. But what should that be is a bit of that question mark for me.
Mm. Yeah, I
Now,
mean, I agree.
yeah. So moving on to, the fact that again, every player in Europe, everyone wants its own app. Everyone has its own app. We've talked about the fact that it's hard to keep up, right? With all the industry innovations. If you benchmark yourself, with others, of course, you need to keep up. So it feels like it's been a lot about, as I was saying at the top, transitioning, modernizing your platform, etc. So you've just done that with RTL Plus, moving them from their own technology stack to yours.
Yep.
Can you tell us kind of a bit more about the process and the pains and gains, so to say?
Well, first of all, migration is what you have to do these days. I mean, no one is launching new platforms. We've done that in the past, but nowadays it's all about migrating and migrating, hopefully, to something better. That process is, luckily, we have done it now so many times. So we have a pretty well oiled machinery to kind of go at it. But it's obviously, you're playing with fire, right? If you take the RTL Plus in Germany, we migrated more than 7 million subscribers. That, I mean, every subscriber has a pretty high value. You simply cannot screw that up, right? You simply cannot afford to generate increased churn or mess it up. It's just not a possibility. So by definition, it's high stake. Now, knock on wood, I'm happy to speak about this afterwards when everything went well. It really went really well. It was a lot of hard work on both sides, and it was a lot of really good collaboration that happened. And we obviously, there was multiple KPIs that we were following, and then the ultimate North Star is we cannot by any circumstances create additional churn, which we didn't. And that was, and of course there are precursors to churn, how much people are using the app and these kind of things. So, but yeah, luckily we went through the process and it was really smooth. And this is, and I would say, why are we doing this? To your point, we can offer more scale, we can offer better economies of scale in terms of lower costs, And like to your point at the beginning, when we develop things, we develop it once, and then we can turn it on or off, so to speak, on in the different countries based on those stakeholders' needs. So it just makes a lot of sense, right? And it's a tough process to go through, but once you're over it, it's really good, and you can celebrate.
So yeah, I think you finished that over spring, and
In
I did
April.
hear about the no churn and no losing customer. I think that's amazing. I think that's a proof case, that those big migration can happen, should happen.
Yeah.
If I you've mentioned scale. And so Bedrock operates over 10 million subscribers across, again, RTL Plus, M6 Plus, Videoland in the Netherlands. We're talking over 45 million users, 6 countries. So that scale. You've mentioned, yes, cost saving because you're doing this thing, once and for all, so to say. But in terms of perhaps features, right, and learnings from one another, because all of those players you have, they are a tiny bit different, right? So M6 is a free-to-air broadcaster. They have
Yeah.
linear plus AVOD. RTL is a super app because it also has music, it has digital books, magazines, etc., on top of a video value proposition. So instead of scale, for the sake of it, there's just like that feature parity and that best practice sharing that the others can benefit. Anything that you can point to where you've seen that happening for some of your partners?
No, yeah, and it happens all the time. As in, it's very cool because, like I said, we tend to evolve and be pushed, so to speak, by one country. It's different countries in different areas, so to speak.
Yeah.
Typically, MCs, they're very advanced in advertising, so we push the boundaries there. And it doesn't mean that the other stakeholders at the same moment say, "Great, I need that exact thing." But 6 months later or whatever happens, then they discover that they also need it, or they let MCs go first with a new format or whatever it is, and then they evaluate it and then they turn it on. So that happens all the time, and it goes across everything, right? It goes across devices. So there's always going to be some country that is pushing more than the others on device coverage. It goes on ads. It goes on features. I mean, just recently, you probably read Videoland is in the process of acquiring Viaplay.
Yeah.
So it means that their content mix will change and it will go a lot towards sports. And they're like, great, and then they
Mm.
want to have a conversation with, the other players who have Champions League and Formula One and these kind of things. So it's a very unique environment where people can learn from each other. And the fact that they're on the same platform where they can, pull features on and off is I would argue a great advantage. You can of course learn from someone else in a different market, but then you don't really know if is everything else the same, or can you draw the conclusions correctly or not. Here they can draw the conclusions and they can act on them really quickly. So it's pretty cool to see. It's very nice to see when those conversations happens. We have these kind of product boards when people come together and have all these conversations, and yeah, the last one we had just a few weeks ago, and yeah, there was a lot of conversations around football and around sports. So it's very cool to see how they learn from each other.
Yeah, fascinating. You're going to be the migration king because I hadn't thought of that. But for those who don't know, Viaplay, Nordic player streamer, invested heavily internationally, had to kind of pull back, but kept the Netherlands because they have the rights to F1, and with Max Verstappen, well, performing not so well anymore. But this was kind of the some of those key rights that were very appealing to subscribers. What's funny is that these guys actually did it the other way around. They started as an SVOD streamer in the market and then launched a TV channel. And again, I think always the same point that I'm making is that linear TV isn't dead. It's a great way to reach some pockets of audiences in each of the European markets. Speaking about Germany a little bit, so you've done RTL Plus, but we've just seen the approval from the German authorities and the European authorities on the RTL Sky Germany partnership. And there you have very different technology stack. One is a pay TV offering a lot of live, very premium, etc. Does very little advertising, if not none. There's also that question of there's so many different platforms, different brands, etc., on each side of that merger. Are you guys going to be working on that? Is that your next big chunk to work on?
Yes, yes, it is. I'm happy to say. Obviously, Sky is very big. There's the, let's call it the old world with set-top boxes and those kind of things, satellite, which is not something we operate. But the streaming side, which is obviously the where the growth lies,
Yeah.
that is our area, as you know. So yes, that's I mean, there's not the only challenge, but that's one of the challenges we have coming up. And yes, they have historically been on the Peacock platform and will move away from that. That's the plan, coming to Bedrock. And yeah, I think this is a really good example of another brand or stakeholder. I mean, it's still the same as RTL, but still that will push the boundaries. And it's very cool, right? They have super cool rights. They have very high expectations on features around sports and these kind of things. So that's the perfect example of a partner pushing Bedrock to become even better in different areas that will benefit all of the other stakeholders. And like I said, they will not all at the same time turn on those features. They will do it
Yeah.
when it makes sense for them. So, but it's, yeah. And to the point you made earlier, we solve the challenge once and then make it available to everybody. It's not rocket science. It's just a way to get scale and to be able to offer all of this at a fairly reasonable cost versus developing it over and over again, right?
At the top, we discussed a bit about the World Cup. And so M6 Plus, that was their biggest live event, right? Since the, what are they, 50-year old or so? So that was their biggest event, live event. You said 54 live matches because it was in the US, late nights, etc. What can you say? So you said that everything went smoothly. So I won't get into that. But what were perhaps the few things that you guys did to augment that live experience, right? Because the basics are the live stream needs to work. Ideally, no lag, no nothing, no buffering. That works great. What can you bring, on top, right? That perhaps someone else wouldn't.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I think it's important what you're mentioning that doing live and Netflix has painfully experienced this, right? Doing live is very different from VOD. It is those peaks, and it's not just a peak; it's also a peak in an extremely important moment that just cannot fail, right? So there is just a lot of engineering that goes into making that work, and a lot of investment. It sounds kind of simple, but it really isn't. And I know that anyone who is dealing with live peaks know that it's not simple. So that's heavily investing there, and to your point, and of course making sure that there's limited lag. I mean, streaming, well, let's see how it evolves, but streaming is for sure slightly after
Yeah.
live. That's just it's just a reality, but it's a question of making that lag as small as
Yeah.
possible. So that is key, of course. Then we have, for example, a partnership with Ease Live, which brings then stats, overlays, voting, and what MCs Plus and MCs did. They kind of interacted with their audience during the match. People could vote on their favorite player or whatever, and then they use that data and in their post match commentary and studio kind of shows, which is a nice way to kind of bring in interactivity in the whole thing. So there's those kind of things, and again, then there's even more things that will come with Sky, more features, more cool stuff, but nothing that I can talk about in detail right now. But for sure there will be more things. So
Great.
yeah, so streaming has the benefit of bringing additional value, right, to around sports and other things. So that's very cool.
So we're almost coming at a close. If I could ask you about one thing, that perhaps surprised you in the past year, something that happened in European streaming, what would that be?
If I can go back slightly further than 1 year, I would
Yeah.
say it surprises me how slow we move. I would say. I mean, if you, I know I've said this. Like, if you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said that our stakeholders would have like
Yeah.
50% of their traffic on streaming versus traditional media, and that's not true. I mean, so I know in certain countries, and you can find those stats, but it's just, I think the user behavior is slower than the speed of tech. That is something that I have gotten wrong.
I think that's a good point. Now, it's funny because you say that, and at the same time, I think it's been, at least it feels that way from an industry perspective, not necessarily from a user perspective, a viewer perspective. But I feel we've been able to innovate, quite a lot within the regions. People are thinking outside of the box more and more. All right, so yeah, you said you were wrong before. So I'm going to put you, on the spot and ask you about something to look forward to. And then in a few years' time, we'll go back and perhaps you'll be right or wrong. Let's see. But if I could get a little projection from you, right? And that can be from the industry, from a tech innovation perspective. And also, what is kind of your key focus coming up? What matters to you from a technology and innovation perspective to do exactly what you said before, which was let's go faster.
Yeah. Well, let me give you, let's say, one prediction. I'm not saying that it's necessarily our focus area, but let's just start with a prediction. I think that, and it's not necessarily only streaming, but I think that in a not so far future, most consumers, or at least the savvy consumers, will have their own, let's call it entertainment agent. Their own,
Interesting.
and it would be like, maybe it's, I will just speak to my agent and say, I don't know, make me a booking in that restaurant. And by the way, I want to watch the World Cup. Tell me where to watch it.
No.
Or it can be very precise, like, sign me up to this and that service. I hate ads, or I am okay with ads, so whatever. I don't want to spend more than €10, and I'm okay with some ads, stuff like that. So I think that you will more and more interact with your personal entertainment agent, and that agent will figure out the world and basically feed it to you in a way that makes sense to you. That's how I think things will evolve.
Yeah, that's one I have on my list too.
Yeah.
And it brings me both, excitement and concerns. It's exciting because I think it
There are
speaks
no
to the
concerns
need.
with AI.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Like I'm torn, but I
Yeah.
think it speaks to two things, right? It's making things it should be like a conversation and easy interaction. So it's a lot about ease of use. So that I'm game. I think the gain for a consumer, a viewer, could be massive. Now, from a business perspective, my concern is that, you've said it at the top, we can be quite slow in Europe. And right now, aside from Mistral AI, there's no European company investing heavily in being that agent, right? It feels like history is repeating like the internet, and everything is going to be in the hands of big tech. So as much as I love that idea, I worry about us, again, having a US gatekeeper in the mix.
Yeah. No. I agree. I mean, I agree on the. I wish Europe had, let's say, more advanced AI companies. I agree. At some point, your toaster will not work anymore if the
Yeah.
AI is let's say, not European friendly. So that's an issue. I agree. If I take the specific use case I was talking about, I don't think that it needs to be an European AI agent, right? It can be
No.
whomever is powering the agent will for sure have a great business case. Then, the way I see it from a European content owner, storyteller kind of perspective, is it does fundamentally change the game for the super aggregators, right? So if you
Yeah.
take a YouTube, or if you take a Amazon also e-commerce, right? What they do very well is to aggregate content, so you as a user know where to go, and then you will find everything in one place. But the you as an individual, you won't go fishing and looking for content. That will
Yeah.
be your agent, right? So the value of aggregating content in today's landscape
Yeah.
will disappear, or let's
Mm.
say heavily decrease. The aggregator, so to speak, from your perspective, is your agent. You
Yeah.
don't really care how hard the agent needs to look. You don't care if it looks in two places or in 200 places or 2,000 places, right? It doesn't matter because it's going to be done by the speed of lightning. So to me, it actually, I would say it gives back power, I would argue,
Interesting.
to the content owners like an MCs and the ones who have brands, who have content that resonates. I think so. So obviously, the streaming services, let's say, like the one we operate, if this kind of vision comes true, it will be a parallel world for a long time, right? So you will have like the normal way of engaging, and then you will have the super advanced way of engaging. But I think it will shift the power a little bit in the market, and I think it will decrease the power of super aggregators, and
Mm.
it will increase the power of really premium content owners or brands. Like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
my
well, I agree with you, and I hadn't thought of that, but it does change who the aggregator will be for sure. I think what's interesting is that it means that it's so much the one who facilitates that will matter, but the one who creates. And I think that that is great at a time where actually you see broadcasters, streamers, etc., investing heavily, then having to go be on XYZ platform who shall not be named, without that platform taking any of the risk. It says those who are creating the content have the most value,
Mhm.
and deserve that one-to-one relationship. So I love that. Having said that, you said they would be living in parallel for a long time. I will say that I think a lot of companies are not investing enough in figuring out how to exist in that world.
That's
So
probably true. I
yeah,
would
I
agree with
think
that.
at the top of the year, one of my prediction, and I was urging content players from all boards to actually invest in a geo, is it AEO, whatever AI led strategy that makes sure that what they're doing is being discovered. And it's not going to happen overnight. And during SME Live, actually, we're going to do a few sessions on AI in action. And one of the things is those LLMs, those agents right now are trained on open web data or are trained on big tech data, therefore are biased, right? So whatever you're asking, the input matters and the output is so biased. So I think broadcasters, streamers, everyone, content providers need to really get their hands on this, instead of just like they cannot just lay there and wait for it to happen. They need to be proactive in
Yeah,
order for them to win.
yeah. On that note, it's worth mentioning that MCs Plus has a gateway or interface or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it with OpenAI, for
Yeah,
example.
I saw that.
Yeah, so I mean, again, this is like very early days, and but I think that that is a type of stuff that is needed, right? Because you want whoever are going to be running those individual entertainment agent for Marion, for Jonas, whatever, you want them to have access to the RTL Plus, the MCs Plus, et cetera, content, right? So they easily can find, and if it matches the end user's requirement, it should be then surfaced, right? So yes, there's a whole ecosystem that needs to work behind the scenes for this to happen, and I'm sure it will, and we are certainly going to work on that, but it will take some time, and I'm not, again, it's like I said, end user behavior moves way slower
Yeah.
than tech. There's of course some exceptions, but yeah, the volume of people will not be doing this in
Yeah, we
2020.
that's I think it looks like it looks very likely this is how people will engage more and more again in that chase for ease of use. Well, Jonas, thank you so much for being with us. You're going to be on stage with me and Evan Shapiro because we're doing a live episode of the Media Odyssey
Okay.
podcast during SME Live.
Happy to do that.
You're a friend of the pod. You were there last year, so I'm sure we're gonna have an amazing time. Thank you so much for your time, and to everyone who's been listening, thank you guys. If you want to attend SME Live on September 10th, just go check out streamingmadeeasy live.com and grab tickets. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Jonas.
Thank you so much, Marion. Thank you, everybody.